Good morning. I'd like to spend a little bit of time today talking about the three branches of government, what all of the branches do. Um, I'd like to talk about the political parties and how they impact the government, and I'd also like to talk a little bit about how a bill becomes a law. I'm going to do this by interviewing a few people and sharing with you some information that I've put together so we all understand our political system just a little better, and it helps us actually get involved. We're going to take a moment to just look at a couple of videos now, and I think when you interview our younger population, I think they have a general understanding of what the political government does for us, but it's a little hard for them to really apply that. So we're going to look at what they said, and we're also going to look a little bit at what older folks may know about the government, maybe as they are involved and doing a little bit more.
Jared,
Yes.
can you name the three branches of government?
Executive, legislative, and judicial.
Hi, I'm going to ask you a few questions today about what you know about our branches of government and so forth. So the first question that I want to ask you is, what are the three branches of our government?
Executive, legislative, and judicial.
Okay, that's fantastic. So when you really look at what the branches of government and the roles that they play are, you need to consider that the legislative branch, which is the Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, the Congress really has the authority to make the laws, and a bill can only be passed into law if the Senate and the House vote for the approval. Oversight of the national budget, which is Congress reviews and restricts the budget passed by the executive branch, and the legislative branch also investigates any wrongdoing by political officials. The executive branch, which is the president, he is our commander-in-chief. That branch is to execute decisions made by Congress and make any recommendations and set policies, and oversight of the country's budget, national security, and decisions impacting the economy. The judicial branch, the Supreme Court and our court system, really they're appointed for life. Judges play a major role in defining and preserving freedom, equity, and justice. The branches make the final decision on any case challenging the government, and provide strong checks and balances to both the legislative and the executive branches. These branches all work together to form a bit of a checks and balance to make sure that any law that's proposed as a bill to the Congress has the appropriate due diligence and analysis and so forth before it's approved. There's committees that get involved to review and approve and make recommendations, and it's quite a complicated system. Each branch of government, as I mentioned, needs to work together, but they all perform a little bit of different functions. Let's take a look at that for just a moment. The political elections actually allow our voters to elect their positions in all three branches. And then based on the parties, whether they're Democratic or Republican, the majority of the positions that are of one party or the other actually drives the opportunity for leadership positions, such as Speaker of the House, Majority Leader. The party with the lower number of votes becomes the minority party. So sometimes you'll hear them talk about how the Republicans own the House, because the Republicans got the majority of the votes that year. Then the Republicans get the opportunity to choose the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader, while the Democratic Party would then have the lower number of votes and become a minority. So then as bills are introduced to the three branches, the three branches actually have to work together to thoroughly review, debate, and decide to vote the bill into law or not. While the judicial branch is actually there to interpret the laws and then apply cases brought to them. So for instance, if a person was going to bring a case to the Supreme Court, for instance, because they feel that their rights in some way have been violated, the judicial system would actually apply the laws that have been created by our government, and then the decisions that the judicial branch make become the case study by which becomes how we follow that law in the future, and of course until another case is tried, and if that is ever changes policy or whatsoever, but they do need to work together to do that. They regulate each other through checks and balances, as each branch has the opportunity to debate on the bills that are brought before them, and voting is based on majority. So when a bill does not meet the required number of votes, it dies. And when a bill is debated forever in Senate, it dies. Lots of people like to say that bills are killed in committee. So if someone decides that a bill is complicated enough, it needs to go to a specific committee to be reviewed and analyzed and let that committee put forth a report. Well, sometimes that bill stays in there forever and the bill just dies. It's very complicated to get a bill approved into law. However, when the bill does pass each chamber and it reaches the president for approval, the bill, once it's signed, does become a law once it's signed by the president. And then having each chamber work together forces the majority of votes, and this prevents any one party from being too powerful. Political parties work together to vote to pass bills into law. If there is not enough yes votes, the bill dies. Having both parties work together and vote allows checks and balances, which I continue to talk about because it's so important and it's the foundation of how our government does work together. And each branch, the executive branch, the President of the United States, really has the ability to veto. So if a bill actually passes all of Congress and it gets to the President, if this is something that is in complete disagreement, the President can veto the bill and send it back with recommendations or with why he or she was not happy with that bill.
All right, Jared, name what each branch does.
I can't.
Not any of them?
No.
Okay, so thanks for that answer. What does each branch do? Can you talk a little bit about what each branch of government does?
Executive branch is the president and so on and so forth. The judicial branch is the Supreme Court, and legislative is the lawmaking body such as Congress and Senate and the House of Reps.
Very good. So now if I was to take a look and ask those same questions of someone just a little older, let's see the kind of answers that we might have. Hi Jerry, thank you for letting me interview. Can you spend just a moment just naming off the three branches of the government?
Sure. There's the executive, legislative, and judicial.
Great, thank you. Can you also share what each branch does?
Sure. Legislative actually passes the laws. The judicial enforces them, and the executive are the powers that pretty much come up with the type of laws. They set the tone for what they're going to work on for the upcoming year.
Can you name what the two major political parties are, and if there's ever a third, name a third and let me know maybe what type of an impact they've ever had on government?
Sure. So there's Republican, Democratic parties. There's also other smaller parties, like we'll use the Conservative Party as an example. And they get enough of the vote to where they can swing it one way or the other from an election. So the smaller third parties, Conservative, Libertarians, Green Party, etc., they'll take away from the two major parties, but they're also a way to attract people in to the two larger parties because they're a little more extreme than the other ones.
So as you can see by listening to some of the answers of the folks that we interviewed, the major parties of the government are obviously Democrat and Republican. Everyone always gets that answer right. But it's a little bit difficult when asked to tell us what another party may be and how they may perhaps impact the government. But it's important to understand that the two-party system actually started in 1792 when the Democratic-Republican Party was created to oppose the policies of Hamilton and the Federalist Party. The party supported states' rights over the large, powerful government. However, one could even argue that the two-party system started even earlier when the Federalist and the Democrat-Republican Party were forming during the Federalist era in 1789 to 1891. It's also these two parties and being able to work together started very, very long ago. And it's important to understand if there are smaller parties that do come along, like the Conservative Party. These parties are smaller, but can definitely have an impact on national politics as large activist groups form and support the party. Sometimes there are so many votes in this smaller additional party that they can impact an election because they can take so many votes away from the Democrats or the Republicans. In recent elections, grassroots attempts to change policies and government have impacted national politics because, that sometimes forces, what's on the agenda, what these politicians are focused on and so forth, because they know that's what the country is focused on.
All right, so that was really great, Michael. The Democrats and the Republicans are two of the major parties. Can you name a third?
The Green Party.
What does the Green Party do?
It's like a third party. It's not as large as the Democrats or the Republicans, and they I'm not exactly sure what they do.
Have they had an impact on government?
I'm pretty sure that they're so little that they don't really have as much as a pull, so they really don't.
And our last question is, what is the basic process by which a bill becomes a law?
It has to go through Congress, and it has to get I'm pretty sure it has to get a 2/3 of Congress vote, and then the president has the power to veto it if he doesn't like it. The judicial branch, the Supreme Court, has the power to, which is called judicial review, and they can get up to the justices to determine whether the law is constitutional or not.
So how a bill becomes a law? First, it goes through the House of Representatives and the Senate. The president has the overriding authority to veto or let the law just go through, but it's really up to the two House parties that are going to come up with the laws, and they're going to be the ones that debate them on the floors and ultimately are going to pass the laws.
Wow. So how does a bill become a law? It becomes a law through a very specific process. Legislation is introduced, and any member really can introduce this legislation, which is generally called a bill. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make this a little bigger for you. Legislation is discussed with the Senate during the time established, and if any member of the Senate disagrees with the legislation being introduced, then it is introduced a different day. Just getting it introduced can be difficult. The Speaker of the House assigns the bill to the appropriate committee. Sometimes portions of the bill are passed to various committees. Timelines for completion are then established. And committees work with the bill. They have hearings can be held. The bill can be referred to subcommittees. Committees can hold a markup. So I'm trying to make this better for you. Committees can hold a markup of the session for editing and so on until it's time for the bill to be reported for a full vote by the full committee. The full committee has to allow it to pass, and if so, the bill moves to the House floor for vote when the Speaker in the House and the Majority Leader actually determine what that date is. So the Speaker of the House actually gets to decide when bills are introduced and which bills are introduced, so he's got quite the powerful position. The House debates the bill using the rules set forth by the Rules Committee. The House has specific time frames for length of time each person can speak until everyone has had the opportunity to debate, and then it is voted on. If it passes, it moves to the Senate where it is debated with no time frame, and that's where you get the word filibuster. Filibuster occurs when a bill is taken to death, it's talked to death, and the bill dies, or the Senate passes the bill. So just getting it through Senate is difficult. So consider if all of Congress is Republican, all of Senate may be Democrat, the bill's not going anywhere. It's very difficult because they can hold it up. If the bill passed, the bill moves to the other chamber for review and vote, and if other chamber has a similar bill, then members from each house form a conference committee to work out the differences, and either chamber denies, then it dies. If the conference committee reaches a compromise with a written report is prepared and must be approved by both chambers, then the bill must then pass by both the Congress and the Senate. Once it's passed, the bill moves to the president and can be signed. The president, obviously, as I mentioned before, he or she can pass the bill into law by signing, or he or she can actually veto the bill and return it to the House for reconsideration.